Hi everybody, this is Dr. Michael Leahy again. In this final video for the App Challenge series, I want to show you some strategies you can use to develop more advanced hosted feature services that can be used more effectively across the ArcGIS platform. Up to now you've seen some examples of different ways you can create new hosted feature services. Through the developer's account, for example, you can start from scratch and define the geometry type and basic attributes that are assigned to each feature in a new hosted feature service. You've seen that you can upload an existing dataset to your ArcGIS Online account and have that automatically publish as a new feature layer with the geometry and attributes predefined for you. You've also seen that you can publish layers from an ArcMap document or ArcGIS Pro to create a new hosted feature layer with all of the geometry and attributes and the styling that you define in your map document. To illustrate the problem I'm looking to solve, I've acquired some data sets from the Halifax Open Data Portal, specifically the street center lines and civic addresses, which I downloaded as shapefiles and uploaded to my ArcGIS Online account and published as new hosted feature layers. I'm going to open the street center lines in a new web map with full editing enabled, and I'll zoom in on a location so that we can see some detail, and then I'll add the civic addresses to this web map. Now I know from reviewing the metadata in the Halifax Open Data Portal that each of these civic address points contains an attribute that is the street centerline segment identifier that the civic address point is related to. If you're familiar with working with related feature classes in a conventional GIS environment, you'll know that we can establish a one-to-many relationship between the street segments and the civic address points. Now we can't do that in this context because these two hosted feature layers are actually stored in separate services. That might not be a problem for us in an application that we're developing ourselves where we can encode the knowledge that a street segment identifier is something we can use to query the civic address feature layer to get related address points. However, without formalizing that relationship class in a single hosted feature service with both of our layers together, other applications across the ArcGIS platform won't be aware of that relationship and won't be able to present to you out-of-the-box controls or functionality that comes along with related feature classes. One other thing I'd like to show you, if you were to edit the street centerline segments, you can see that the street class attribute is a simple text field, which means that any user or application working against this hosted feature service can input any arbitrary text value in this field. And we know from reviewing again the metadata in the Halifax Open Data Portal that there are actually only a limited number of valid values used in that field. And we can see this, for example, if we enable the smart mapping to style this layer based on its street class attribute. So we see here a limited number of street classes that are used in this data. And what we'd like to do is control the ability of users or applications to only use those values when they work against this hosted feature service. So I'll show you what I've done with these data. In this map document, you'll see the same feature layers that I've acquired from the Halifax Open Data Portal. But what I've done is I've actually imported those shapefiles into a file geodatabase. And inside here, I've created this relationship class that defines the one-to-many relationship between the street center lines and civic address points. In addition to that, I've defined a coded value domain with the valid street classes that I know can be used in this data, and I've assigned that coded value domain to the street class field on the street center lines feature layer. And so what I've done is I've published this map document with these data from this FileGeo database to a new hosted feature service in my ArcGIS Online organization. So I'll show you what that looks like in the ArcGIS Online organization. So you see the service definition that was uploaded and the new hosted feature service that was created. I'll show you the item details. So you'll see in the feature service details here that it now contains both of our feature layers. We can look at the REST API to see that the relationship class that we defined is now encoded directly within this hosted feature service to relate our two feature layers. And you can see the coded value domain that I applied to the street class attribute is now represented in these types on the street centerlines feature layer. Now I can open this in a new map viewer. Once this map loads, I'll zoom into a smaller area so we can see some detail. And then I'll turn on the civic address points. So I'll show you if I identify one of these street segments. You'll see the default pop-up now exposes this option to show related records. So this is the ArcGIS Online map viewer detecting the relationship class in our hosted feature service and allowing us to access and interact with the features in the related feature class. So you can see how that works, and applications and SDKs that you use across the ArcGIS platform can leverage this capability that you've encoded in the feature service. I'll show you also if you were, for example, to edit one of these street center lines, you now have a predefined list of available values that you can set for this street class that conforms to the domain that we defined. So you're no longer able to enter any arbitrary value because this has to be validated against the domain. Now there are a few other things I'd like to show you about creating feature classes in your organization. So you've seen a variety of ways to create hosted feature classes, creating them from scratch or publishing them from existing datasets. But I'd like to show you this one last option, which from your My Content page, if you choose the option to create a feature layer, you'll actually see that you have access to a wide selection of predefined feature services that you can create that are tailored for a variety of different application types. Now, if you don't find one that suits your purpose, you can of course create your own feature service schema. For example, what we did with the Halifax streets and addresses. And you can use that to serve as a template for new hosted feature services. So if you select that, you'll pick the layers that it contains that you want to duplicate. You'll be prompted to specify an extent and enter some details. So what this will do is, behind the scenes, it's going to duplicate all of the properties of your hosted feature service and the schema of its feature layers in a new hosted feature service that contains no data. So it's essentially an empty template. So the way you can take advantage of this as you're working on your App Challenge projects is that you can spend all of the time up front to create one hosted feature service that contains any relationship classes or coded value domains that you want to incorporate into it. And then you simply duplicate that as needed to create copies of the feature service that you might use for sandbox testing or for a final production version when you're ready to submit your final application at the end of the App Challenge. So hopefully you can take advantage of some of these strategies that I've shown you here to enhance the the content that you create to support your applications in the App Challenge.